vote, much to the surprise of Hillary Clinton's campaign, and a state that is crucial to his re-election victory. So earlier on today here at the White House, his close advisor Kellyanne Conway was talking about the importance of him being seen out there in the Midwest, touting what he sees as the achievements of his administration, the strong economy, the job numbers. Meanwhile, back here in Washington, he's got the party in an iron grip, hasn't he, Katy? And Republicans who started off by saying that they didn't like what the president did on Ukraine, but it wasn't impeachable, soon got the back of the president's hand. He didn't like that kind of defense, and now they're all saying that he did nothing wrong, and this is just an attempt to undermine the election.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because we're reaching a critical moment on the House floor where the Democrats now have 207 votes in favor of impeaching Donald Trump on Article 1 of the resolution, that is the abuse of power. Once they get to 216, they'll have crossed the threshold. We're going to wait till we actually hear the gavel and the final tally to get that. It's worth remembering that if Donald Trump is impeached on just one article, he will have been impeached. He will be the third American president ever to have been impeached. He doesn't need to be impeached on both articles of this resolution, on the obstruction of Congress article as well. So we're watching that number, worth keeping an eye on. 208, 200, and we understand it's 4 that are out, so it would be 216, but we're going to be careful about when we actually call that moment, John.
Okay, I'll just keep an eye on that screen as well. I was just going to compare it to the sort of whipping system that you have at Westminster in the House of Commons, where I've spent many years in the press gallery there. And the tradition, the historical kind of association is that the whipping system is much stronger at Westminster. The parties are much more powerful. Yet having watched today, I've been really struck by every Republican has almost had a script. They've said you can make your own speech, but they've been hitting key talking points again and again. They've each had their own speech, which will play out in their own districts on kind of the local radio stations, on the affiliate TV stations. But it's been really disciplined by the Republican Party that they are all sticking to one line. That is the thing.
I think that's a fascinating thing. You know, for all of us that were here for Ronald Reagan, who's iconic among Republicans, Reagan never put up the type of numbers that Trump is putting up. Republicans support Trump to a level that we had never seen before, despite all the controversies, despite all of the criticism, and of course, despite an impeachment investigation. And the needle has not significantly moved in terms of how people feel about it.
You know, the phrase that we used in 2016 was that this was a hostile takeover of the Republican Party by Donald Trump. Actually, how hostile? I mean, this looks like a merger. You know, it does not look like that these are people that are kind of, oh, okay, if I have to. These are people that are in there and they're making the Trump
John, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. We've now got to actually 214 votes in favour of Article 1 of the resolution, that is the article of impeachment of abuse of power against President Trump. There's about 1:30 left on this vote. They have a certain amount of time. It's 214 because there's one independent member of Congress who has also voted to impeach the president. So literally watch that number, 214, it'll get to 215, it'll get to 216. At that moment, we've crossed the threshold. Then we wait for the gavel. And at that point, President Trump will have been impeached. Who haven't voted.
Is there some sort of added drama that they're trying to give by kind of being the last ones to vote?
I said they were voting mechanically by pressing the button. I understand actually quite a lot of the members have decided they want to vote with cards because they feel that's a more effective way of actually being recorded for history, so they could choose a card and vote that way as well. I think it is more dramatic. 215 is the number we're at the moment.
There's little machines behind the chairs in each row that actually have the 3 buttons that you can push, one for non-voting and one for yay or nay. And I was a page on the House floor at a young teenage years, and we would often see members push the wrong buttons, and then they would look up at the screen and panic.
216, there we go. 216 votes have been passed. We've now reached the threshold where enough votes have been passed for President Trump to have been impeached. Let's assume we have to wait a few more minutes until the gavel, seconds actually, until the gavel is passed. Once this is all gavelled in, we will actually be able to say the president has been impeached, but there are enough votes. 216 was the number they needed. They are now at 219 in favour of impeaching Donald J. Trump on the charge of abuse of power. 166 votes against, with two Democrats and the rest of them Republicans. As soon as we get that gavel, we will bring that to you. Jonathan Turley, I interrupted you.
Oh, no.
You were a page on the House floor when I interrupted you.
Oh, no. Some of the members actually don't trust the machines, and on a historic act like this, many of them might prefer the cards. That's going to create a problem with the time running out, so they may have to give a little bit of leeway here. Everyone wants to be recorded. This is going to be one of the most faithful votes for many of these members, particularly for those Democrats in 30 districts that went for Trump. And it does take an element of courage for those members to go against what is likely the will of their districts.
And we've had members in the last few days who have said, if I vote to impeach the president, I may well end up being thrown out of office next November. And who knows, the House could end up being lost for Democrats potentially, and this vote may play a factor in that.
That's right. I mean,
it is a very consequential vote for all members of Congress, but particularly for those members of Congress who are in swing districts and whose own constituents might be pushing them to vote one way or another, or to vote against their own conscience. But most of the Democrats, even those in swing districts, have said, we're thinking now about the Constitution and our oath of office. We're not thinking so much about the politics of this.
Yeah, and I think it's astonishing when you talk to people on both sides. If you go to Chicago and talk to them about the impeachment, you will hear people who are absolutely feverish to impeach Donald Trump. If you go down to St. Louis and pull a right and head to the west, you will not find a single person
until you reach California.
That's right, until you reach California, that is willing to accept there's any merits at all to this. And it's like an audience watching the same movie and coming out with two completely different messages.
I was in Elissa Slotkin's district yesterday, and exactly that. Exactly that. Speak to Democrats. They've kind of got one version of the truth. Speak to the Republican supporters of Donald Trump, and they have a completely different version of the truth. And they've all cherry-picked the bits that they've liked, but have paid no heed to the bits that kind of confuse the argument. People want things in pretty black and white terms, binary choices that they feel very clear about. And Elissa Slotkin is, she may struggle in 2020, and she knows it. But she felt, look, if not this, then when? And so was, pretty articulate in her town hall meeting, although it was pretty raucous in there.
So we've just had, this is interesting, because if you've been watching the NV column, which is the no vote column, it was at 28 a couple of seconds ago. It's now gone down to 25, and look what's happened. We've had one of those has gone to, two of them have gone into the no column for the Republicans, but one of those is a Republican who has actually voted yes. So we have now one Republican who has voted yes to impeach Donald Trump. We are going to try and find out who that is right now, but that vote was switched just in the very last few seconds. Sounds like perhaps a Republican who changed their mind.
Well, I'll tell you
what seems odd, given that you think you have all of this lead up to it, and you've had a whole day of debates, hours and hours, and you would think you would know. And there's another vote as well, which has just switched too, but that's still a Republican in the no column. But that Republican who's voted to impeach the president, that's an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, I thought the most fascinating thing about watching this debate was to look at the faces of these members. These are people who are margin players. They put their political careers on the line on bets as to what's the right political move. I think what's interesting about this impeachment is no one on that floor knows how this is going to play out in 2020. And it's a rare place for many of these members to be. They've made their careers predicting how things will play out. And the fact that they're on the floor means that they've been correct more often than not. But you're looking at 435 people who don't have a clue. They don't know if this is going to be a live torpedo in the water that hits their ship or the other one.
Isn't the remarkable thing about this presidency, Jonathan, that we have talked about the turbulence, the turmoil, the kind of everyday dramas of extraordinary highs and extraordinary lows, and you kind of think it's an amazing thing that you're watching. And you look at Donald Trump's approval ratings over over 3 years and they have barely budged.
So sorry, John, I need to interrupt you because we were talking about the Republican who might have voted yes to impeach. Actually, that vote has now disappeared from the yes
That's
column.
what I was saying about the buttons.
And it looks like there may have been a mistake either in that tallying or in the buttons or whatever it happened, but they have been taken off that column. So it was significant because the president has been saying that he wants to watch this strong, unified Republican vote. Obviously, if one of them had voted yes, he wouldn't be able to say that. But now he does have the Republican caucus still unified behind him, 185 Republicans at the moment voting against impeaching Donald Trump. 227.
This goes to what I was
Democrats in
saying
favor.
when I was a House leadership page, is that we spent a great deal of time running into the hall trying to find members to tell them that they pushed the wrong button. And they would look at you with complete terror and say, no, and oh, yes. And you would have these poor middle-aged...
How democracy is made.
This is
just one other thing, sorry, John, before you start. I just want people to look up on the podium behind, at the back there, and you can see Nancy Pelosi, who, the Speaker of the House, of course, who has now come into the chamber. She's going to preside over this. She'll be, I imagine, the person, Jonathan, am I right, who'll be gaveling this and making this announcement.
She's going to deliver the coup de grace.
She will deliver the final word on this, and she is up there by her chair, so we can expect that to happen any moment now. Sorry, John.
Very briefly, Jonathan, when I was reporting in the House of Commons, the whips really were burly people who would, in the John Major government, I remember watching one Conservative MP being pinned against a wall by two of the whips to be told, get into line, and it was physically threatening and intimidating. This is tame by comparison. You're just going to face a Twitter storm for whatever you do.
Well, it's funny because it's not actually necessary. Because Donald Trump is your whip.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to make a single threat because this has become an almost religious experience for both of these parties. So the whips are almost superfluous. All they have to do is make sure people know which button to push because it's, as you said correctly, it's baked in. And you can't, a lot of these members feel they can't cross that line. And we're going to see who's right and who's wrong.
It's that discipline that I was talking about in the speeches that they each delivered. There was, everyone made their own speech, everyone had made their own points, but there was a kind of